Welcome back to the Register Kettle podcast. I'm Reg reporter Brandon Villarolo, and you're going to be absolutely shocked to discover what we're talking about this week. I'm kidding, of course, it's AI. Specifically, the fact that it seems the world is kind of starting to wake up to how much it costs to actually run these giant models that are supposed to make life easier for enterprises and their employees, but it seems like they're leading to some invoice shock. With me to talk about the latest panic over AI costs are Reg reporter Lindsay Clark and our contributor Job Jackson. Thanks to both of you for coming on.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. So, Lindsay, let's start with a story you wrote recently about the fact that C-suite occupants are apparently having trouble getting a handle on new usage-based AI costs. What exactly has them so confused?
Well, I mean, I get the impression that big companies are diving in with both feet with AI. It's the latest trend. They're using it for a lot of coding and using it for business apps, trying to do stuff in the business with it. KPMG is a massive global consultancy. They do provide IT services and outsourcing services. So they have some.
And they're the ones who wrote the report, correct?
That's right. Yeah, they wrote the report and they have some skin in the game. But so they did this survey of more than 2,000 senior execs at over 20 countries, I think, and found that 29% of them struggle to understand the operating costs as they scale with enterprise AI deployments. And nearly half of them were also looking to kind of rephase, they call it, their AI deployments when the costs outweigh the expected value. So
So what exactly, explain rephase. I mean, is that just, are they rethinking the deployment itself, or are they, changing the scope? What's that mean exactly?
it's like just kind of slowing down and looking at what they're doing
Okay.
is my understanding from the report. And they're looking at lower cost models, high fidelity models. Um, it's kind of looking for a mix of models to deploy rather than just
Mhm.
you know maxing out on the most expensive ones.
Yeah, right, which has kind of been the case. I mean, usage-based billing seems to be, I mean, it's a relatively recent development in this space, right? I mean, it was all just come get your free samples until we get you kind of in the door enough to the point where you're at least somewhat dependent on this, and then we realize, oh, we actually have to make money off this. I'm
Yeah,
speaking as an AI frontier lab here, right? And then, we're gonna have to charge you per token because, my gosh, we're just not able to turn a profit.
yeah. So Anthropic, OpenAI, GitHub have all moved from, as you say, like a subscription, a flat fee, all you can eat kind of
Hmm.
model to usage based billing based on tokens. And that's the vendors, both the model providers and the application vendors that want you to use AI agents in their applications. They want people to, as I say, jump in with both feet, just kind of use
Yeah.
this stuff as much as possible, and then as is typical perhaps for the IT sector, then try to change the commercials as we go.
Yeah, right. Which, I mean, again, it's a big enough issue that it's like you said, right? More than a quarter of C-suite people are getting a bit of bill shock here and
Yeah,
realizing that they might not be able to afford this.
yeah,
But again, right? They're kind of maybe a little bit hooked in because their engineers have been using this long enough. I wrote a story recently about um, a engineer, like an open source skill that someone wrote to basically test engineers to make sure they're not losing their edge in this environment, right? Because a lot of them are. I mean, we've written plenty of stories about developers becoming dependent on this,
mm,
forgetting how to do some of the basic things they used to be able to do, right? It gives these AI companies a big inroad to basically say, well, hey, now we're going to actually try to make money. But right, it does put them in a kind of a precarious position, right? Like if you charge too much, these companies or these enterprise customers are going to try to find a way around it, whether it's an open source Chinese model. I think those are on the rise in a lot of businesses,
mm.
or it's some other solution, like you said, rethinking their deployments and trying to go with smaller, large scale models. But if you charge too little, you're never going to make enough money. Is this a needle that these AI labs can thread, you think, or is it one that's pointed straight at the bubble?
Well, I mean, just before we get into that, I think there's a report from Gartner a few weeks ago that
Hmm.
I thought was quite interesting, and uh, was they had done some research about the cost on this topic, and this is for AI assisted coding, and they were
Right.
really
This is one you covered back at the end of June,
that's
right?
right. Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
it was a researcher called Nitish Tyagi, and yeah, I mean, he was saying that there's a real lack of transparency from the vendors
Hmm.
over the costs of their coding agents, and they don't have cost optimization tools that you would expect, so that you might get in the cloud. For
Right.
example, because of this, the costs of the coding agent per developer was going to exceed the actual salary of the developer in 2028, and that's the
Yeah.
average salary
That's
globally. Um,
right.
he was already finding that in some areas of the world where salaries are a lot lower, like India, the cost of agents is actually exceeding the salary of the developer. So that's because the cost of agents is the same throughout the world, whereas developers get paid differently according to where they're located.
Right, I imagine it's never I imagine the cost of these are maybe never gonna exceed the salary of developer in, like, Silicon Valley, right? Those guys are making a lot of money.
Exactly.
When I
Yes.
yeah, when I think about that, I'm like, "Oh my god, there's no way that you could have token costs being in the hundreds of thousands of dollars." But, yeah, overall, global average, that's still a lot, right? And I can understand that it's probably why you see a lot of companies I mean, obviously, there's been concerns about the viability of AI deployments and what have you, causing companies to basically rehire the people they're laying off. But it's another thing that kind of screams, how sustainable is this? You
Yeah,
know?
yeah, yeah. I mean, that research, I mean, to your point about the bubble, I mean, they have to recoup these costs somewhere. I mean, on the macro
Mhm.
picture, I think there was a report, I forget which one, it was some big investment house was looking at the CapEx across the industry for AI data centers, and it was 1.5 trillion from over 5 years until
Mhm.
2030. So that's a lot of money, and it's got to come from somewhere. Again, on the Gartner research, they were saying that all the model providers all have kind of different ways of doing the billing as well. There's no standard. So if
Mhm.
if you're looking at a way to approach this like the model providers are likely to, then it's very hard. And Gartner were encouraging to people to take matters into their own hands to look at kind of optimizing their own usage, minimizing their own usage,
Mhm.
and one of the things that came out of that call was that there's no direct relationship between any increase in token consumption and an increase in productivity in coding in this case, but
Right.
but
Right.
and that was very telling. It's like it's not the case that you more that you use, the more that you get out of it. And actually, they were arguing that if you are kind of quite careful with how you do this and controlled, then not only do you end up consuming you less, but that your what you get out of it, the quality of the code you produce is also higher as well. Um, that was reflected in the I had a conversation a few weeks ago with Spencer Kimball, who's CEO of Cockroach Labs. I mean, they
Mhm.
have a database business. They sell databases across the world, but Spencer Kimball's well known in the coding world. He spent a long time at Google, and he wrote the GIMP open source image processing tool. And he was saying a
Love
Cockroach,
GIMP.
yeah, he was saying a Cockroach that they don't do token maxing. They're like, we just use a whole bunch of models. We use a lot of open source models, but that's appropriate. We use the cheapest models. He said there's no point in maxing out a model when you haven't provided the right context because you'll just get more and
Right.
more rubbish back. So, he was almost in line with what Gardner had said and they were big into agent coding, but he was in terms of is quite circumspect about how you deploy it on the commercial level.
Mhm. Yeah, speaking of token maxing, actually, that kind of brings me to the next story I want to discuss. Job, you wrote this a little while ago about a Netflix engineer who it wrote an open source tool that has become real popular real fast. And it's apparently, according to a talk he gave at at an open source symposium, saved the many users who've adopted it hundreds of thousands of dollars by trimming input to LLMs in order to save token cost, right? So it's like the opposite of token maxing. This is like token minning here. What exactly did he come up with? Can you explain that?
Yeah, he actually this was a home project, like all good open source projects started out as. He
Right.
had gotten a $287 bill from Claude Sonnet,
Hmm.
and for some work he was doing. It was not a heavy amount of work. It was some debugging, some MCP type stuff, that sort of thing. But he was kind of curious how do you how do you generate that large of a bill from that kind of a modest of a workload? And so he took a look at what he was sending over to Claude, and most of it's known that like most all token consumption is all from input. You get charged for both token input and output, but
Hmm.
most of the bills come from what you're putting into the system. And he was inspecting the stuff that he was submitting and that his agent was submitting, and most of it, the vast majority of it, was completely redundant. It wasn't useful instructions. It was like database schemas or sort of or I'm sorry, JSON templates or
Hmm.
a lot of log work, that sort of thing. And so he figured that if he could create a program that would look at all the stuff basically and tear out the redundant parts and then submit the useful information, then he could save money. What now there is like Claude does have a number of settings, but you quickly kind of descend into AWS billing hell, so to speak. There's a cache setting. Like every
Hmm.
time you give a query to an LLM, you're actually tagging on your complete back and forth history up until that point. So
Right.
a lot of the same information gets passed up. And you can set that with Claude, you can set that to 5 minutes, how long you want that history to stay. And there's another setting where, you can set it to an hour, and this is the kind of example of how things get tricky real quick. You can set it for an hour to live, but it costs twice as much, but then you get 90% savings in reads, which so now you have to do the kind of math of the kind of stuff you're submitting and
Hmm.
versus, your workload, that sort of thing.
So
Now
this
there
is
are
basically
Mhm.
Oh, go ahead. This is basically trimming the fat, right?
Yeah,
Where
basically.
instead of resending all that stuff as token input, it's basically telling the model, "You've already got this. Use what you have," essentially, right?
Yeah, and, it's not even you think, "Oh, well, I'm typing a bunch of stuff in, you're being very chatty." It's not that, it's all this, like, needlessly verbose schemas and,
Hmm.
like, if you send a if you have it execute a Rust command and it's in verbose mode, you're gonna get all that verbose stuff, even though the LLM doesn't need it.
Right.
So he came up with
Right.
a bunch of like little modules that he calls squashers that take a look at these areas, database, compression, JSON trimming, that sort of thing. And there's a lot of VC backed token trimming tools now, but he wanted something inline. He wanted something that worked directly from the command line, and so that's what he came
Hmm.
up with. Now, just a clarification, this wasn't work he was doing. He has another job entirely at Netflix,
Yeah.
and, but he built this program on his own, and from what I understand, he let a few Netflix engineers try it, and they liked it, but it just took off all of a sudden on its own anyway.
So it's not like an internal Netflix product. This is his own
No,
project,
no.
basically. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming, when I read the story, I was like, oh, I'm kind of curious how this would work. I'm assuming that this is entirely dependent on a context window, right? Like,
Yeah, this is shaping the context window, basically, yeah.
okay, okay. So I mean, if we go back beyond a certain point, right? Because context windows have a termination. I'm assuming that at that point you're going to have to start resending stuff if you're still undertaking the same conversation, right? Like this is only effective as long as it remains in context.
Yeah, from my understanding, I use Gemini quite a bit, and from my understanding, they do keep a cache of the stuff, so it does seem like a conversation. But after a certain point, all that the conversation is seamless to you, but at some point, all that data is being loaded back,
Right.
for the LLM to parse
Right.
once again. Yeah.
Gotcha. And so what's doing the actual so I think it's project headroom, right? So what's doing the work of clearing that headroom out? Is this another LLM? Is this local algorithms that he's written to do this work? Where's that compression and that trimming being performed?
Oh, that's all being done on the client. He isn't using the LLM at all,
Okay.
from my understanding. But there are different types of algorithms. He used some not LLM-sized AI, but
Hmm.
some statistical analysis, like, eh, say you send over a database table, the LLM probably doesn't need that entire database table. It needs the first few entries, it needs the schema, it needs any outliers to kind of get an understanding, but it doesn't need all 100,000 rows. So it's
Right.
basically a series of tricks that he's come up with, and now other contributors have come up with to kind of basically to tidy it up a bit.
Cool. So I got I think you wrote or in the story that his talk at the open source symposium mentioned I think $700,000 in savings for the people who've been
Oh
using it.
yeah,
Do you have any? I know you wrote the story at like the end of May,
I
and
haven't
we're talking about it now because it's still relevant. But like, do you have any update on how much money this thing is saved and how much people are using it? How many people are using it?
I haven't checked in lately on that, but originally it was he had estimated just from his users, just from the because there's some telemetry in the software that you can opt into, and for
Hmm.
those who opted in when they downloaded the software, saved about 200 billion tokens,
Wow.
which accounts by his estimate to about $700,000. So, but there's
Yeah.
other users who aren't submitting this information, and who knows?
Right.
It's open source, so you can't really track it. But I
Yeah.
did speak with him fairly recently, and he had said that he couldn't get into the details, but the project is taking off. Who knows? He may have found some financial backing, but it does definitely seem to continue to be attracting attention.
Yeah. So did I mean I didn't see in your story was there a estimate of like percent of a token budget, percent of an average query that this was trimming off, or is that gonna be varying so much by use case?
Like server logs, 90% of server logs could be aren't necessary.
Mhm.
70% of JSON, because a lot of JSON is the formatting, so
Right.
70% of that, can also be cut. So you're looking at anything that's like routine formatting data is you don't really need it.
Yeah, so a lot of this is trimming off a lot of stuff, basically.
Yeah, and he
Um
also he also has he also had a kind of a nifty feature that everything is he does some text compression, not a lot,
Mhm.
but everything is reversible, so if you need to go back or so if the LLM needs to go back and get more information, it can do that.
Oh, cool. So yeah, this isn't a
So,
permanent thing, right? Yeah.
yeah.
So I guess it's interesting. We're seeing lots of horror stories about AI cost skyrocketing, huge bills. On the flip side of that, we see daily limits getting eaten up, leaving users with workflows and projects that are freezing in the middle of a workday. Right. This might be what a lot of businesses need to kind of both free up tokens and trim AI expenses. I mean, but what do you guys think? Is this the sort of thing that's going to be enough, or does something else have to give here too?
I would like to I mean, we talk a lot about how, generative AI is evolving, but,
Hmm.
if you really wanna go back to evolution and discuss Darwin, one of the core components was limitation of resources. I mean, you
Hmm.
just everything can grow indefinitely
Yeah.
without any limitations, but at some point, and this is when the real kind of, innovations, kicks in is when you only have limited resources. Now we got a lot of people complaining about, data centers, too many data centers, using too much electricity. I think the LLMs now are hitting that point. They're going to have to, figure out how to make it work, strictly with limited resources. And,
Hmm.
I'm not, I read a lot of AI research. I'm not seeing a lot of AI efficiency research coming out of the labs. So, maybe it's just a necessary next part is we got this technology that we don't fully understand, but we have limits too. We have to start to factor in those limits.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. I mean, and that is, I feel like the case. Oh, go ahead, Lindsay. Were you going to
Well,
add
the
to
only
that?
thing I was going to add is that as well as people looking at open source tools here, the vendors, at least within the database market, see a big opportunity here. So I've spoken to and I've read about a number of database vendors who are basically trying to improve the efficiency and reduce calls to LLMs. So, for example, a company called Pinecone, which did vector databases a while back before everybody else did. And
Hmm.
they're looking now to create this kind of semantic layer between the agent and the and the kind of business data and the kind of tech environment. So you store the kind of basics of the landscape in terms of database schema, or how the company does financial processes. So you don't have to make calls to the LLM and create queries to find that out every time afresh. Um, so it's the point is, I think we're going to see a lot of people, perhaps from open source or perhaps from proprietary vendors, see an opportunity here and selling to companies on the basis that they can reduce the costs of AI agents in their business.
Y Yeah, I would hope that maybe Oracle's working on that because we discussed in, I think, last week's episode, they're one of the most exposed to this bubble right now, right? All the other, big, data center players that are courting the AI market, it's Microsoft, it's Amazon, right? It's Google. These all have big things to fall back on if the bubble does end
Mm,
up popping, whereas Oracle is just on the hook for a
yeah.
lot of money and not a lot of other stuff going on there. But if
Well,
they can turn that database into a, like I said, a semantic layer that sits between and reduces calls, that might be
I
Yeah.
don't know
pretty
because
pretty
they're
valuable.
also reliant
Yeah,
on OpenAI for I mean
right.
back last September they announced was it 450 billion pipeline of committed uh, data center spending, and the
Mhm.
market went, well, hey, that's great, and the share price went up. And
Yep.
then a few weeks
They're
later, I
down.
don't know if you read the story, but OpenAI were on the hook for 300 billion of that. Now, obviously,
Yep.
and Oracle's borrowing money to build these data centers
Oh,
as
yeah.
well. I mean, it
Yeah,
has a
that's
huge.
exactly what I wrote about it.
As Microsoft pointed out at the recent Build conference too, you're gonna need to do these kind of in between products anyway, just because the enterprise, it's a very kind of specialized task. There's all sorts of domain knowledge, and you don't want to hand that domain knowledge over to the LLM providers. So there's going to be this whole set of middleware to like pair the data for analysis, and
Mhm.
that's gonna have to come from the channel, basically.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it all depends whether the model builders, if they're revenue models, their revenue forecasts are based on this kind of trend for optimization that we're going to see in the next few years. Are they forecasts based on that, or are they forecasts based on token maxing? And
Token maxing. Yeah.
exactly,
I mean,
because that could be a
right,
big
based on what
difference.
Job just said, right? Yeah. It's like, well, based on what Job just said, he doesn't you don't see a lot of efficiency work coming out of these labs. So my thought would be it's probably the latter, which probably doesn't bode well for the future of this industry. I mean, what do you guys think? Is this another thing that we got to watch out for as a potential part of the bubble? Is this going to exacerbate problems? Is this something that can be conquered and moved beyond without causing a whole bunch of industry destabilization? I mean, what do you guys think?
Well, I don't know. I
Oh,
mean, like we keep thinking about a bubble. There's been lots written about a bubble, but
Hmm.
the markets seem fine as they are, and there's a lot smarter people than me investing a lot of money in this. But there is also cause for concern in terms of
Hmm.
we don't really see exactly what the business model is going to be here.
Yep.
There's
Not a lot of returns yet on investments. Yep.
Exactly, there's question marks over liabilities. I wrote a piece about, well, who's gonna. I mean, the whole other side to this. So there's AI agents doing coding, but all the big application vendors are looking to build AI agents that do your kind of business work for you in finance and HR and stuff like that. You talk about liability in that space; they're not going to be liable for any of the decisions that they make. So there's a question mark over that as well. Um,
Mm-hmm.
we've seen bubbles burst in the past. But my feeling is the capacity will be used at some point in the future, but then there might be a kind of few bumps in the road along the way.
Yeah, yeah, right. We still have websites, right?
Yeah,
The dot-com bubble burst, but websites didn't go away. AI is not going to go away. I think it's here to stay.
yeah.
It's just its scope and its shape and its use is probably going to be curtailed or changed.
Yeah.
Joe, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, weirdly enough, well, it reminds me of the dot-com bubble, but also reminds me, I don't know if you guys remember the tablet craze of, I guess it was early 2000, and Windows, Microsoft completely refactored Windows for the tablet format, even though like 90% of their users didn't have any sort of touchscreen capabilities. But there
Right.
was this hole for a while, 18 months, where it's like the software vendors had to come up with touch-enabled versions of their software, and all the laptop manufacturers had to do touch screens, and eventually, we have the iPad and some other Surface, but it was I guess the tech industry does tend to go too far in one direction, but eventually it pulls back to kind of gauge customer demand, and a much smaller but more useful industry is there somewhere.
Yeah. I guess the big question is whether or not we're entering this, phase of constraint-driven Darwinian evolution in the AI industry that will save it from popping, or whether it's going to burst before then. And as I think the Bank of International Settlements said, take the entire global economy with it. So either way, hopefully we will still be here to talk about it on the Kettle, and we hope that you will join us for that future episode. Thanks for tuning in.